They commit to sidewalks and planting strip along West Sugar Creek Road and an internal sidewalk system throughout the development. They commit to crosswalks, a crosswalk with a refuge island with a warning beacon at this location, and they are providing buffers for the adjacent single-family residential properties. You can see the proposed buildings, the entrance and exit. They have a proposed playground area, 30-foot buffer, and open space. And then there's also a possibility of connections to the property to the north of the site. In terms of this petition, multifamily residential use is consistent with what the East District Plan recommends. And however, it doesn't meet the GDPs. The GDPs recommend 17. This is just slightly over to 18.1. The site is located between I-85 and single-family residential uses. The plan recommends multifamily, and the GDP is just a little bit, the density is a little bit higher than the GDP recommends. However, the proposed residential development provides a transition between the commercial and the existing residential neighborhoods. The site commits to private streets, future access to non-residential development. They have a pedestrian network and open space. In addition, they include the building elevations. They've committed to architectural details such as building orientation, facade standards, and roof lines, roof types, along with other design standards that make this property compatible and this development compatible with the surrounding single-family residential development. So staff is recommending approval of this petition upon the resolution of the outstanding issues.
Thank you. We have 7 people signed up, 5 for, and 2 against, so you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor.
And Mr. McVeigh, Mr. Tim, I always say that inappropriately. And so we'll start off and we'll see who else you bring up out of this group. So 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council, members of the Zoning Committee. Keith McVeigh with Moore Van Allen, assisting C4 Investments, LLC. Jeff Brown and our firm and I are assisting the company with this proposal. C4 Investments is affiliated with Crosland Southeast, a company started by Tim Simna and his partners really to address the workforce housing needs of the city. With me tonight as well as Tim and John Butler with C4 Investments, as well as Paul Ballman and Barry James. Also here with us is Kathy Stillwell with Mosaic. Her company will be managing and operating the workforce housing units if the petition is approved. I want to thank Tammy for her help with this petition. We will address the remaining issues, except for the density question. The number of units obviously important to the development of the site, and as Tammy mentioned, we feel it makes an appropriate transition at this location between what's located on Sugar Creek Road and the single-family neighborhood behind us. We have adequate buffers, setbacks, appropriate building scale that we believe address the transition appropriately. We also are across, as Tammy mentioned, from across Sugar Creek from Sugar Creek Park. We're on a transit line. We're a short distance away from the Blue Line extension on North Tryon Street in Sugar Creek as well. So we believe those issues mitigate the fact that we're at 18.3 units to the acre versus 17 units to the acre. We think a very minimal difference. That those kind of changes to the plan would not be significant changes that would significantly alter the plan or make it a better plan. We think we have a good plan with adequate buffers, as Tammy mentioned, public street or private street and connectivity to the future parcels to the north should they develop with compatible uses, pedestrian access and connections to the Sugar Creek Park across the way. We have reached out to some of the speakers that are speaking against the petition. One of their concerns being some of the uses that have located, mainly the older hotels that have been located at the intersection of I-85 and Sugar Creek. They're created some problems for the area and become a negative impact on the neighborhood. The petitioner looks forward to working with the neighborhood to address those issues with the city's help to improve things. We feel that this investment, which is over a $30 million investment in the area, is a positive sign for new investment in the area and bringing new quality residential units to the area, we believe will start to have some positive effects on some of the other issues that are currently a negative impact on the location. We do have architectural commitments in terms of building materials and style, stone, cement, fiberboard, and other materials. And as Tammy mentioned, we are working or have committed to provide a pedestrian crossing from the development to the Sugar Creek Park, which will be we feel a great amenity for the residents of this community, as well as the other non-residential uses in the area and the access to transit. Be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Would any of the other speakers in favor like to speak as well?
No, ma'am, but we're available to answer questions.
Thank you. Then we will hear from the people that would like to speak against the petition, Tanya Clarkston and Mr. Wall, John Wall. You'll come down. It was live.
Mr. Mayor and
Yes, Mr. Wall.
members of the council, I am John Wall. I am a resident in the Hidden Valley neighborhood for over 44 years. I'm a member of the Hidden Valley Community Association, and I was asked to come here tonight to share with you a comment about the development 2017-190. I have some members of the community with me tonight, and they are standing. The developer said he had an outreach to the community. Well, these people will tell you they were not contacted about that outreach for whatever reason. We're going to request a do-over so we can have some questions asked about the development of that's being proposed. Three things very quickly. The Hidden Valley Community Association prefers that the development be homeowners of single-family homes, townhomes, and condominiums, which would promote home ownership, not apartment rentals. Currently, the most recent apartment built on our area, North Tryon, is called Blue at North Line, excuse me. That apartment complex, it's a beautiful design. It's at the nearest intersection is North Tryon and Tom Hunter Road. The minimum rental of those apartments, if I'm correct, is $1,375 per month. Now, I don't know if that is consistent with the median income in the community. That's another question that needs to be asked. The only condominium in the area is Orchard Trace, and I wasn't able to pull up the exact selling price of a condominium at Orchard Trace, but I would imagine it would be in the range of $100,000. And here again, I don't know to answer the question if that's affordable or not. I don't know. But the 180 single-family residential property that's being proposed, or a $30 million project, is going to have a rippling effect on the corridor. Like some of the residents from Mountain Island Lake so eloquently expressed their opposition to development, I'd like to do the same thing. Our Hidden Valley Elementary School is over capacity. We have trailers and mobile classrooms there. I don't know how much over capacity, but it is over capacity. The Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School is nearing capacity if it's not already over. There are approximately 5 schools in the area that's going to be impacted by this development. Even if 180 additional apartments at 2 children per apartment, that's 360 children, additional children in the area, and it exponentially increases as the number of children in the homes or the apartments are placed in the area. Let's talk about pedestrian traffic. Now, I know for a fact, within the last 9 months on West Sugar Creek Road where this project is proposed, there have been 2 fatalities. One was a young man crossing the street in a wheelchair late at night, and he was hit by an automobile. And the other one involved a Charlotte Mecklenburg police officer. So a crosswalk is great, but it is absolutely important for the council to take a deliberate observation and analysis of this area, of this corridor in particular, because it is the main gateway from I-85 into the city of Charlotte. It is used by the CIAA tournament that's going to be in Charlotte in a couple of weeks. It's going to bring 100,000 people here. And a lot of those people are going to be staying in the apartments or hotels in this exit. The NASCAR and all of the activities at UNCC Charlotte, a lot of those folks who visit Charlotte utilize the hotels and motels in this area. So it's absolutely necessary for the council to take a deliberate approach to this request. And finally, some of the residents expressed what kind of impact is this going to have, future impact is this going to have on our existing home values? Will the development of a $30 million apartment complex increase the value or decrease the value? What is the focus of this development on gentrification of the area? And we've seen in NODA how gentrification has increased the value of those properties. Are we going to experience the same thing in the Hidden Valley community? And I think there's a safety concern that I'm not going to address. I'm going to ask the young lady to come and speak to you on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have 4 minutes left. Ms. Clarkson, Tanya Clarkson.
S-T-O-N.
Clarkson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, Zoning Committee members, and communities, members of the community. My name is Tanya Clarkston. I have been a resident of the Sugar Creek community for 11 years now, almost 20 years in the Charlotte metro area. I am the president of the Farm Crest Community Neighborhood Association. And I would like to thank you for the opportunity to come and discuss with everyone the oppositions we have concerning this project. As a community leader, I see the growth and the transition that is taking place throughout our city, and I can echo the thoughts of other residents in our community and that we can live with development. In fact, we wish to see sustainable development actually take place within the West Sugar Creek community, just not to the extent currently proposed. For a high-quality, multi-family residential community to be successful and to become a positive revitalization component within the West Sugar Creek community, we must first seek resolution to current impactful quality of life issues that we are experiencing there. Excuse me. Some of those issues are not limited to high violent crime rates stemming from the 13 hotels located in the I-85 Sugar Creek corridor area, and the lack of access we have to healthy foods, pharmacies, and financial services that already plague our community and the lifestyles of our present residents. Today, I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Butler and Mr. Satima from C4 Investments, where we had an open conversation about not only the concerns being vocalized by residents on the placement of the potential 180-unit housing complex, but also on the hazards future residents will be exposed to regarding traffic, congestion, and pedestrian safety issues. Also, we talked about the issues of violent crime that currently make our community an area of unstable, safe, affordable housing. With that said, as a resident and a community leader, I really do ask you guys and the zoning committee as well to reevaluate the rezoning at this time until a more in-depth strategic vision and economic revitalization area plan can be put together. In addition to that, we would like to see C4 Investments address and present a more solid game plan to community members, since so many of us were not actually in receipt of the first community meeting letter. And that way we can go ahead and have an open, full discussion with them in regards to all the following issues that we had that we actually discussed today in our meeting. And some of those issues are actually with the on-site safety concerns for the new residents, and how that is in relationship to the proximity of all the crime stemming from businesses in the Sugar Creek corridor area, and how those types of crimes continue to push our community into a vicious cycle of decay and other issues. One of the biggest things that we feel is going to be a continuous issue for us, even if there is no development, is the traffic and congestion concerns that we have. Continuously, we are seeing, rates on a daily average of 35,000 cars coming through that particular area in less than basically a mile and a half range. In addition to what Mr. Wall was saying, we have seen several pedestrians hit and killed over the past 2 years. If I'm not mistaken, that number averages about 7 individuals from 2015 to 2017 at this point. So with that said, we also want to wish to make sure that if any kind of pedestrian crossing is to take place in this community area, that is one that's actually viable and feasible for the needs of our community. And with that said, the current plan that they have put forward is not something that we feel is going to be feasible at all. The average speed there in the community is supposed to be at 45 miles an hour. Typically, you're seeing cars getting over 55 miles an hour easily. And with congestion rates as they are today, you see it backing up 2 and 3 times a day on a natural occurrence from that whole 1.5 mile radius from the corner of North Tryon and Sugar Creek to the 85 Sugar Creek corridor area. So with that said, again, I really do ask that you and the City of Charlotte work alongside us, the residents, the property owners, the businesses, the community leaders, and the organizations of the West Sugar Creek community, and come together to form a partnership with C4 Investments and any other potential developers that might help identify resolutions to our problems and offer infill development alternatives that will resolve the current needs and issues of our residents.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your comments and suggestions. Thank you. Mr. Satima, I'm sorry, Mr. Wall. If you want to leave something with the clerk?
Yes, I wanted to.
Well, I can't. I need you to just leave it with her. Okay. Mr. Tim Satima?
Sidema.
Sidema. I want to say that wrong. Sidema.
That's a tough one. I'd like to thank the speakers, Ms. Clarkston and Mr. Wall, and all the residents for attending tonight. We would be more than happy to have another neighborhood meeting. We had one in December that Councilmember Phipps attended. I wouldn't say it was a great turnout, but we had maybe 30 folks, and it was a very respectful and generally positive conversation, and we'd be happy to host another one and give the rest of you an opportunity to get into more of the details of the project. As we discussed today with Ms. Clarkston, we share a lot of the same concerns that she expressed, the quality of life issues, a lot of those stemming around some of those I would call seedier hotels, the 13 of them at the intersection. We share those concerns. We want to make sure we find out where the hot spots for crime and criminal activity are and do everything we can with your help and the help of CMPD and others to try to clear up those areas. Absolutely. We also agree that Sugar Creek is a gateway. It needs to be a gateway. And we think it's a good start to spend $30 million building a quality project along that area, along that corridor. This is, for clarity, a diverse income, as I'm reminded, diverse income, or more specifically or more commonly referred to as an affordable housing project. Our rents are $700, $800, and $900, roughly speaking, for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and we're targeting 100% of these units are 60% AMI and below. So this is an affordable housing project with for affordable rents. Speaking specifically on the density issue, we're respectfully asking for 180 units. That's what we feel fits comfortably on this site. We've got appropriate buffers. We've got appropriate setbacks and conforming setbacks. We could reduce density, as staff has suggested.
Thank you very much for the rebuttal. So let's start out. There are questions, Mr. Eggleston?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, and I'm fairly familiar with this. One side of the street is District 4 and one side is District 1, so I've had a chance to speak with Ms. Clarkston and some of her neighbors in Farmcrest about this. A few questions. I know it's 100% 60 and under. Have you further defined that mix any? And if so, can you elaborate?
Yes, yes, sir. The mix is 100%, 60%. 100%, 60%. We
Okay,
would
sorry.
look, though, to accept rental vouchers.
Legitimate? I believe that the petitioner has offered this, is voluntarily offering the affordable housing.
I just wanted to mention this is not noted on the site plan, so it is not at this point a commitment.
But it was noted in the comments before the questioning began, right?
Right.
I believe there needs to be clarification.
Yes. So, yes, the petitioner did say that, and the question I thought was in response to what he said. It's not on the site plan, is what you're saying. It's not under, this is a conditional rezoning, and so the question is, could it be placed, is your question, the answer,
He answered it.
and is it?
We'd be happy to make that commitment because that's what we're doing.
That's what I was asking. Would you commit to it on the site plan and the conditions? Is that what your inquiry might be?
I think that's what.
He has
Mr.
voluntarily
Dress-
said he would without my asking, so even better.
And I say that because we can only discuss it if the petitioner has voluntarily offered it and it is part of.
She
the-
did, right?
Well, we're confirming that.
Clarifying.
Yes, just making
I
sure.
heard it.
Okay. All right. I guess.
Secondarily, I do think that pedestrian concerns here are very serious. So I appreciate this crosswalk going in. I don't know if Ms. Clarkston wanted to address this. I think I understood her to be saying that maybe there was something that design-wise they would prefer to be different as far as that crosswalk goes. Did I? Yeah, if you will, and I'll ask my other question while you're coming down, and then if there's something that you have a concern with on that crosswalk, I'd be curious to know what it is. I know they're generally in favor of that. My question is, the crosswalk is concerned would be, if the plan were to be approved, is that something that would or could be built, not necessarily as a requirement, but just as a courtesy? Could that be built at the beginning of the construction phase? Because I think that's something that's direly needed in that neighborhood. So I don't know if that's an option.
My project manager said yes, subject to permitting. We can certainly try to phase the work in such a way that, you know, we've got to do some certain amounts of grading and so on before you can do other efforts. So we'd be happy to consider that and try to accelerate the construction of that crosswalk.
If I may, I don't think I explained fully. The crosswalk does include a pedestrian refuge island in the
Yeah.
middle, and as well as a blinking sign to alert motorists that there is a crosswalk and to look for pedestrians. So it's more than just a crosswalk.
Yes.
And speaking with these gentlemen about that, the problem is that particular location for the potential of this complex is the area that has the most congestion on Sugar Creek Road. So with that said, in order for individuals to cross over basically 4 lanes of traffic to get access to the Sugar Creek Park, I don't think that active beacons, flashing active beacons, are going to be the most effective solution for pedestrians and for motorists alike to understand who has the right of way.
So you'd rather see
Stops for that.
like a hawk signal with like a red light or something to that effect, where it's.
Yes, and even from my understanding and speaking with CDOT before on previous concerns about pedestrian safety from the 600 block up to the 1300 block of West Sugar Creek Road, there is no way that there is potentially any viable way for them to add another stoplight in that area. So, I don't know if suggestions can go as far as looking at crosswalk bridges or what we can do about that. But I have a feeling that if we were just to install that, if this was to be approved, that we are going to have some serious consequences behind it.
Okay, so did you have anything else, Mr. Eggleston?
My only other thing is more maybe directed to council, in that and I think Councilman Phipps would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, that 85 Sugar Creek area and those hotels that have been mentioned a couple of times are hotbeds for drug trade, sex trade, and it's something that I know that's been acknowledged and started to be addressed, but I think we've really got to put a focus on that. There's also a large amount of our hotel homeless population that lives in those weekly and long-term rentals. I know because during my campaign, when I was pulling lists of voters, I had voters in those hotels, which really kind of stunned me, that somebody who's essentially hotel homeless is still engaged enough that they've updated their address there. So these are people that are engaged citizens and obviously just in a bad spot in life. But we've got to figure out something in that corridor with those hotels because I know it's causing a lot of pain points for our neighbors in both Hidden Valley and Farmcrest. So.
Thank you. Mr. Phipps?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask, I don't know if CDOT is prepared at this point, but I know as the representative for CDOT comes up, that we've been in discussions over the last several months about the safety and traffic conditions on Sugar Creek Road, in as much as that they have a traffic light at Sugar Creek and Tryon, and then I think the next traffic light is at Hidden Valley Drive, and then it's at Reagan Drive. So I know that because of the traffic fatalities and safety issues we've had along the Sugar Creek corridor, there have been some discussion with CDOT and NCDOT on how best to help mitigate some of the traffic issues, and I would hope that you could elaborate on where we stand right now, and also as a part of your discussion tonight, that we would have some sort of follow-up report that would be in all of our information on where we stand with what is being proposed with those two entities working together to improve the safety along that corridor.
Okay.
So I can definitely have comprehensive information in a follow-up report. I'll say that along this corridor is an NCDOT maintained corridor, so we do have to pass all of the projects that we have, particularly crossing projects, through with them to make sure that they're okay with them. So spacing and the types of signals that we use to stop or cross pedestrians all have to follow their regulation as well as ours. And so I think that's all the information I can give you right now, but I'll certainly get back to you about a more comprehensive corridor study if that's something that we're working through.
Right, thank you. Also, I had a question, follow-up question to Mr. Sidema. You had mentioned before your time ran out about a willingness to, or the potential to, the possibility to reduce the density somewhat. Can you elaborate on what you were about to say in that regard? How would that impact the overall feasibility of the project on a go-forward basis if you did reduce the density?
Thank you. I didn't want to stop there, but the clock stopped me there, so thanks for giving me that opportunity. The plan that we're showing here is 180 units. It fits, we think, well on the site. We've got the appropriate buffers and setbacks and all of that. Staff's recommendation of 17 per acre compares to our proposed plan of 18.3, so call it one additional unit per acre. It's about 12 unit difference. We could reduce 12 units. We'd take one of those rear buildings and basically cut it in half. So we'd have essentially 12 yet less units. It would have a negligible, in our view, it would have a negligible impact. You wouldn't notice it, the difference in density from the street. You'd barely notice the difference. It might be a couple of cars, you know, a day difference in terms of traffic. Negligible difference, but it has a material impact on the budget. As you all know well, affordable housing projects are very difficult to finance, and 12 units is almost $500,000 of difference, of additional gap that we somehow have to solve for, either through additional HTF or through additional charitable contributions or some other methodology. So Councilmember Winston said earlier about they wish the developer would have strong-armed or pushed harder. We're certainly not trying to do that, but it would be unfortunate in this particular case if we lost the opportunity for 12 additional units, had to solve for another $500,000 with an impact that, in our view, is is relatively immaterial in terms of the additional impact.
Okay, the next speaker we have is, this next person to hear from is Mr. Winston.
Yes, thank you. Actually, that kind of took away a bit of my question, but I'll be a little bit more specific. As you said, this is a diverse price point housing unit that's going up, but you also mentioned that you could decrease the density. What area, if you did decrease that density, in order to make this work, what level of diversity would be cut?
Well,
This work.
thank you, sir. Our plan for this project is 100% of the units would serve 60% AMI. Okay, so for a family of 4, that's roughly $40,000. It's certainly possible that we would accept, we hope to accept rental vouchers for folks that might be less than 60% AMI, but to make up the difference between the rents at a 60% level and whatever incomes they would be at. There are Charlotte Family Housing and other organizations that might be able to supplement that difference. But our financial analysis underwrites all of those units at a rent paid by a 60% AMI family. I don't know if that answers your question. So if we reduce the unit count by 12, we'd have to figure out whether that's how many 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, or 3-bedroom units we'd end up reducing. But generally, that would reduce 60% AMI residents from coming into those 12 units.
Thank you.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor. So as Chair of Housing and Neighborhood Development, I feel that I need to share with the community a couple of challenges that we have. One, when we talk about diverse price point housing, because everyone should know by now I'm not a fan of the word affordable housing because that's very subjective. It is a very different conversation we're having today versus what we had even 10 years ago. So as an example, my mortgage is less than $600 a month. I'm not finding an apartment in Charlotte at that rate today. That's just not the reality. When I moved here in '88, we had rents that were $375, $400 for a 700 square foot apartment. So when you're listening to a conversation regarding workforce or diverse price point or affordable housing, rents today are very different. The average rent in Charlotte starts at $1,300. According to, within the last 3 weeks, we had an MIT study that was done that says a family of 4, parent with 3 children, living wage needs to earn $71,000 annually to live in Charlotte today. Now, I would also like to acknowledge that my mother-in-law is here. Hi, Mom. Sitting up top. So I am in the area quite often, and I hear the concerns, and I know the challenges, especially with the older hotel units. That is a different conversation that I believe council can have, just as we've had regarding other units that were apartments like the ones that I had along Wilkinson Boulevard that we needed to make a decision about. But for this conversation, I'm not saying yay or nay whether I support either way. Tonight is the hearing. But I do want to make sure that those that are in attendance really have an understanding of when you're hearing these numbers of affordable, starting at $700 a month today is very different than starting at $375 a month 20 years ago, or even $500 a month. But at the end of the day, we have people who are living in hotels, who are paying more in their hotel stay than they would pay for rent. That's once a month because they're paying weekly or biweekly. If we really want a diverse community, and if you listen to the idea that I have regarding diverse price point housing, that is a very different conversation. Hidden Valley is already changing. You're already seeing some development and some growth. Because of the investment of the light rail, you're going to see a lot more of it. But I want us to just step back for a moment and think about what it is we're saying when we have a concern about who's moving in as neighbors. Because that old saying, be careful what you ask for. Example, on Freedom Drive today, all of you know what Freedom Drive used to look like. I now have to work to get housing that is affordable for people on Freedom Drive because we are having so much growth and development that we have townhomes that are starting at a price point that are 3 times what the housing in their area is. So I just want us to be cognizant when we're having these conversations, what does diverse price point housing really look like in a community, and learn that what we may think about what low income looks like and what the reality of low income housing is today may not be the same thing. But I do hope that Mr. Sittleman, of which we've worked together on Freedom Drive with the Movement Project, I hope that you are hearing from the community that a number of residents did not receive notification. They have been here for 30-plus years. Some may have made an investment themselves and moved into the community. You have someone next to you who's been there 11 years. I hope you are listening to hear that the community wants to be very engaged in this conversation, but I also want to make sure that we're having a very honest conversation about what this looks like moving forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think that crosswalks ought to be evaluated. One crosswalk does not make a road that safe, and if we're going to do that, this is one of those times to actually talk about the improvement. I was out with Councilmember Eggleston and Mr. Phipps, and I left my car a long way away, and I tried to find a place to cross that street, and it was very hard. So one crosswalk is not going to be sufficient. And I know it's a state highway. I've heard you say it's a numbered road, and that we have to work with them, but I just really believe that it takes more. We're not going to be able to build an over street walkway. We found those not to work and often to be more or less safe, but it does mean some investment along Sugar Creek. And then I also wondered, the higher density, what would happen if you had higher density and higher incomes as well for more of a mixed use besides the 60? I don't know if your financing is all 60, but I wondered, instead of going lower, if we actually had higher rents mixed into the development.
It's all
More
60.
for mixed,
No, I meant, he was saying that he could go down 12 units or whatever to get,
Right.
or still be viable. But I don't know what your financing is. It's just no answer required right now. So with that, do we have any other questions or comments? Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor of close, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. The next hearing that we have is item 28, rezoning 2017-187 by Magna Development, approximately 79 acres on the northeast side of Morris Chapel Road, north of Morris Chapel at east of I-485. It's in District 3, as well as some extending out beyond the city limits. The current zoning is single-family residential for 3 and 4 and 5, as well as 8 for single-family residential Lake Wylie protected area. The proposed zoning is R6, single-family residential with Lake Wylie protected area, and this is a conventional petition.
Which means
Which means basically you can talk about.
Don't ask questions.
No community meeting, and you get to ask questions directly related to the land use. With that, I'm going to ask Ms. Keplinger to talk to us about this property. And there are no speakers signed up, so.
Wow.
Do we have any speakers signed up? So thank you, Ms. Keplinger.
Notified. Community wasn't notified.
They don't have to, it's conventional.
Yeah,
I
that's what
know,
I'm saying.
I mean, but they could come down and speak if they
Yeah,
knew.
that's,
They knew about it.
it's only if they pay.
There's a sign. Okay, Ms. Keplinger, sorry, we're just having a sidebar up here, aren't we? Go for it.
This property is located just off of Old Moores Chapel Road, just to the north of it, south of the Piedmont Northern Railroad and east of I-485. The property is zoned a mixture of things. It's R3, single-family residential, it's R4, it's R5, and it's R8. So the history on this property is that back in 2003, staff did a corrective rezoning, initiated a corrective rezoning based on the area plan to take all of this property plus some more, it's about 81 acres total, to R5, single-family residential. Now, all of these properties are located in the Lake Wylie protected area, so I'm going to use goes without saying from this point on. At that time, when this went to public hearing, the property owners for the area that is zoned R8 came in and said that the rezoning for R5 did not meet with their plans. They wanted to have a little bit higher density, even though it was just 3 more units per acre of single-family housing. So as a result, the adjacent properties, this was rezoned R4, this was R3, this was R5, and this was rezoned R8. Well, today, fast forward to today, we have a developer that wants to work with all of these properties and develop them for residential development. And it's hard to determine exactly where the boundaries are of the R8, so staff suggested that the petitioner come in and rezone all of the property to one consistent rezoning classification. So the request came in to go to R6, single-family residential. Now again, staff in 2003 was recommending R5. It went part of it went to R8, and now they're asking for R6. In looking at the Northwest District Plan, you can see it reflects what was done back in 2003. The petition is consistent with the Northwest District Plan recommendation for residential at to 4 units per acre, 6 units per acre, and 8 units per acre. The areas within the Lower Lake Wylie protected area watershed overlay, which protects public water supply. The proposed single-family zoning district is consistent with the existing single-family low-density development in the general area and with the R5 that was originally planned. So staff is recommending approval of this conventional petition.
And we're done? Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the staff?
Motion to close.
Thank you. I have a motion to close. A second? I'm sorry. I looked around. I didn't, Miss Mayfield, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Kaplinger, you may or may not have an answer to this question, because what we're looking at is the Northwest Area Plan, but that plan was approved back in 1990?
This plan was actually approved in 1990.
1990. So I think it will be helpful moving forward, since this is a conditional rezoning, which means we don't get to have a lot of conversation and there was no community meeting on it, that I would encourage, now that we have a planning director in place, for us to look at potential updates, especially in this area, because there are quite a few developments that are proposed and or have been approved recently in that area. And when we think about the Lower Lake Wylie area, we still have individuals who are on, what is that? The water, the pumps?
Wells.
Thank you, well water. So wanting, I could not remember. I
knew what you were talking about.
So
Got you, boo.
that we still have residents who are on well water, and think about the impact of all this development and growth that's happening. It will be helpful moving forward that, as was mentioned earlier, that we get a snapshot of all requests that have either been approved or that are being discussed in the immediate area. Thank you.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes. With that same point, I mean, you said it was mentioned that this plan is what, 28 years old?
Yeah.
But we had a rezoning that was approved in 2017, is that not right? So did that rezoning effectively update this plan?
No.
did it set a precedent of development that otherwise you hadn't seen in 28 years?
The rezoning from 2017,
Right, it says 2017-092 was approved, rezoned 14 acres.
that is a piece of property that's on the other side of 485, and it was rezoned to industrial, so it did not set a precedent for this property at all.
Okay, so, thank you very much.
Do I have any other questions? May I have a motion to close? Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda, I think I skipped one, was deferred. 29 was deferred. 30. Item 30 is zoning hearing petition 2017-163 by Miller Development Company, approximately .21 acres located on the south side of North Davison Street, south of East 36 in District 1. Current zoning is neighborhood services. Proposed zoning is transit-oriented development, mixed-use optional. Mr. Maine.
Well, this is 2/10 of an acre, and it's located on North Davidson Street, right at 36th Street, which is the heart of the NODA area, so to speak. You can see on the map here, there is the new light rail line at the top with the 36th Street station right there. And its location, its existing zoning, much of the zoning in this area this has been a hot spot for rezonings for many, many years, even before the light rail was even an inkling. But you can see that the existing zoning with all the stripes there is mud optional and mud and various other more intense kinds of uses. And you also see quite an influx of TOD zoning right along the edge of the rail that has all happened fairly recently. The adopted future land use for this area, it is a station area. It's an appropriate location for TOD kinds of intensive uses. As you see by the purple all around here, the site is right there on Davidson Street, just below 36th Street. And the proposal is a very simple site plan. You will see some photographs in your staff analysis that also shows the property, but it is a single-story building today. It is occupied by the Davidson Public House, one-story eating and drinking establishment, and then a parking lot right next to it, which today has about 6 to 8 spaces, sort of a dead-end use, very difficult to get in and out of. The fire station is located just on the other side of it. The proposal is for a trying to find the right words.
Park it.
Yeah, no, it's not a parking lot. It will no longer be a parking lot. It would be an open-air market, so that the intention would be for the existing building to remain in place and allow for this open-air market in place of the parking, and it would not require parking for that. That would be the optional provision that is asked for, is to get out of the parking requirements for this additional use. There is an existing alley up the back that provides additional ways in and out of this particular site for pedestrian traffic. And there are additional uses directly behind there that actually do feed into it from a pedestrian point of view. There's also a provision in there that any building, if any building is demolished, or if a 25% increase in building is put in place, that they would have to come back for another rezoning. We are recommending approval of this petition based upon just a few resolution of outstanding issues, mostly technical in nature, one of which is to be very much more specific about the existing building remaining in place. The petition is consistent with the Blue Line Extension Transit Station Area Plan. which recommends transit-oriented development. It's within a quarter mile of the 36th Street station. It does provide for a reuse of an existing building that's there, and it's consistent with preservation of those kinds of buildings that are specified in that station area plan. And it does also provide for additional active ground floor non-residential uses, which was also called for in the plan. I think we also want to discuss a few transportation issues. So Johanna Quinn from CDOT is here to address some of those.
Good evening. I'm Joanna Quinn with CDOT, and I wanted to point out a couple of things that CDOT, along with Parkit, the local businesses, and the neighborhoods have been working on in this area. Can we go back to one of the maps? So yeah, that's good. So like I said, CDOT, in partnership with Parkit, the businesses and the residents in this area have been working on a six-block parking pilot study that includes this piece of Davidson along with multiple blocks back within the neighborhood. So what we've done here is actually taken away some of the parking in this block and to create a loading zone, which was supported by the local businesses. There's a lot of turnover there. They need loading access for those businesses, and to kind of manage the congestion that happens in that block. So along with that, we have been working with the neighbors back in the neighborhood to attempt to ensure appropriate parking, recognizing they have a lot of parking needs in that area. So ensure that they are parking appropriately, but still trying to accommodate all the residents and using that parking for traffic calming in the area. So just wanted to point that out because it is, as we talk about parking with this rezoning and the fact that they aren't changing in their access, but we are trying to do some things that so far have been well received by the businesses and the neighborhoods to help support those businesses along there.
Thank you. We have one speaker, Mr. Miller. You're speaking for the petition?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Appreciate everyone's time tonight, and hopefully we can make this short and sweet. This may be the cotton candy of the evening, hopefully. We're not going to build anything. We're not going to tear anything down. We're not going to tear up any trees. We're not going to add any more children in the schools.
Move to approve.
You just got an endorsement right there.
We're real excited about this project. I'm a native Charlottean, grew up in North Charlotte. I recall coming to the North Davidson area before it evolved, the downturn and re-emergence of it as we see today. It's exciting to see the Blue Line extension come to the neighborhood and the additional vibrancy it's creating. We feel like this reuse of a idle parking lot of 6 to 7 parking spaces is really exciting, an opportunity to encourage some new businesses, some new artists, encourage some entrepreneurial endeavors for some businesses in the community that wouldn't have an opportunity to get started. The neighborhood has been supportive of us, and we've met with them on 2 separate occasions, and feel that they're behind us in this effort, and look forward to answering any questions that the council may have.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Mr. Eggleston?
I just wanted to clarify for my colleagues that were with me at the zoning briefing meeting earlier today. I had mentioned that in my talking with the neighborhood, there had been some concerns. Subsequently, this afternoon, I spoke with the Neighborhood Association president and got a note from the Neighborhood Association vice president that they had had further conversations with the petitioner, and as a neighborhood and business association, we're now in support of this project. So I wanted to clarify that based on my earlier comments today.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. Winston?
Well, I would just, while it might be a quick, easy rezoning, as I stated today in the lunch briefing, I live right up the street from here, And this is kind of one of those same areas in terms of traffic, and as we have especially as the light rail comes online and we have more connectivity between different parts of the neighborhood, this 1 square block in particular is, man, it just shows kind of the ineffectiveness of some of our infrastructure. I mean, it's such heavy foot traffic right now, but it's still like a major traversing point for traffic. And I don't think we've adequately dealt with what it needs to handle, the infrastructure around it, and what it's set up to handle. So even though we're only taking away 7 or 8 parking spots, that could have an effect on a Friday and a Saturday night around it. So it's, again, maybe nothing that we can deal with in this particular land use decision, but we can't not think about things as we continue to make decisions Monday to Monday.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, questions?
Move to close.
Second.
We have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 32, petition 2017-169 by the City of Charlotte Solid Waste Services to add and modify definitions and update words to terms currently used by Solid Waste Services and amend the requirements regarding the various equipment items for handling and service interests to align with a complete update of the municipal code approved by the council on September the 11th. And Sandy Montgomery is going to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and council members and zoning committee. This is a text amendment brought forward by Solid Waste Services. And basically, it's adding and modifying definitions in the zoning ordinance and updating terms currently used by Solid Waste Services. As the mayor said, it does align the zoning ordinance language with the recent update to the Municipal Code, Chapter 10.
Yeah.
Next slide. So it's section 12.403 that details the requirements for solid waste containers, compactors, and handling areas in multifamily developments and non-residential uses. So the text amendment updates the following definitions. For large waste container now includes dumpsters, compactors, various names for different containers. Recycling stations is a current term used to designate where recyclables are stored and collected for pickup. And space allocations is the new term used for the handling area. And I have some examples of what these various names look like. This is a large waste container. It comes in various number of sizes and dimensions, and some have tops, some don't. But you can see that they're handled by a truck. These happen to be some front-loading containers in the pictures. The collection services are provided by private haulers, and the containers are provided either by the multifamily or non-residential complex. In Charlotte, the minimum space required for the large waste container is 8 cubic yards for the maneuvering of a container that is then, the minimum size is 2 cubic yards for a smaller waste container. Here's some examples of the compactor type large waste containers that condense the materials, and again, then it's hauled off by a private hauler on a truck, as you see by that one picture. Next slide. Recycling containers for multifamily developments and non-residential uses. Here's the typical private vendor recycling container that's used, and a recycling station is where these recycling containers are stored prior to pickup. Again, services provided by a private hauler for multifamily and non-residential uses. And service entrances, this is basically where the service entrances to the dumpster or large waste container recycling station. It includes the driveway and the maneuvering area to pick up the container. Next slide. The text amendment is consistent and aligns with the Municipal Code, Chapter 10, and the updates that were made last fall to the Municipal Code by City Council. And it also updates and aligns the zoning ordinance terms with those terms currently used by Solid Waste Services. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Do we have another speaker in favor? I'm sorry? Are you Ms. Vicks? Okay, speaking against. So we had 2 speakers in favor, but we're good. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Vicks. Thank you.
We had the staff presentation, so do we have anybody speaking?
Yeah, there was a staff presentation.
Okay.
And these speakers
sorry.
are in favor.
Oh. Thomas is, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, my name is Thomas Powers on behalf of the City Attorney's Office. I represent Solid Waste Services. To my right here is Ellen Price, who is the Deputy Director for Solid Waste Services. Want to basically state that, again, everything that was presented to you previously, we are in favor of this text amendment. This, again, aligns with the previous Chapter 10 revision that was done over the course of 2016 through 2017. Again, this was a issue that, upon adoption by council, we realized that we need to have this amendment as well in the zoning ordinance to account for those changes in Chapter 10. We are here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Okay, now we're going on to Ms. Vicks, so speaking against. Thank you.
Okay. What I have here in my hand is an approved site plan. It's kind of working backwards, as to what everyone else is coming here trying to get these plans approved. Back in 2005, these plans were approved for a UMUD development, where in 2007, my husband and I purchased the commercial space in a uptown mixed-use development. And the plans show approval for solid waste services. Containers are placed on the plan. Before the amendment that took place, I guess became effective January 1st, the only thing that a developer of a UMUD or multiple residential development had to do was to show on the proposed site plans where the containers would be located and the services would be provided by the city, not only for the residential units, but for all units at the development. Those plans were approved, went through the full process, and when we purchased, we were told the city doesn't provide the service for you. We kind of, my husband, he's like, okay, we'll just, go along with it. And the fees for the services started out at $5,000 to $7,000 to $10,000 a year to $20,000 plus a year for services that are $30. And this amendment that was passed in September of last year, saying that the residential and non-residential waste could not be mixed, was, after it was already approved that it could be. And so to take those rights away, when you're saying that these containers are for solid waste and they're an accessory use that's already approved, it's just kind of defeating the purpose.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Mayor, that's me.
Yes.
So someone said mayor, I say mayor, you say mayor, it's all going to work
Let's
out,
all
right?
be mayor.
I think, Ms. Vicks, this is a question about commenting on the text amendment, and I understand that you have an issue. What I'd like to have you do is talk with the staff, let them get your information, figure out how to follow up, because you're describing an issue that you want to resolve.
I am.
And we're looking at the text amendment. So I understand I think it's creative to come down and get that kind of presentation of a problem around the text amendment. That was pretty cool.
Yes.
So we'd like to connect you with our staff so that we can follow up with you on that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So with that,
Move to close.
We have a motion to move and close the public hearing. Any, all in favor? I'm sorry, Mr. Phipps.
Yes, I got a question.
Ms. Mayfield didn't say that Mr. Phipps had a question.
Well, we needed to do the motion first.
Question of staff. So so basically what you're saying that all this text amendment does is to lay out those definitions consistent with the ordinance. That's it, right?
That is correct.
Okay, with that, we have a motion to close the hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Please, if you guys will connect, that would be great. Thank you.
33?
Let's see. I lost my sheet. No, I've lost my sheet on
We
the
on
next,
33?
on my deferrals.
Wait,
The next item is 33. 2017-172 by the City of Charlotte Real Estate, approximately .8 acres located on the northwest corners of the intersection of Harold and Belmont. It's in District 1. The current zoning is B1 Neighborhood Business, and the proposed zoning is mixed-use development optional. The staff recommends approval, and the presentation will be by Ms. Keplinger. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. This property is located on both corners of Harold and Belmont Avenue. In 2017, we had a rezoning on one of this other leg of that intersection. The request is to go from B1 neighborhood business to MUD optional, mixed-use development optional. The existing zoning, you can see most of it there's a lot of single-family residential, but this is in a neighborhood, the properties are located within a neighborhood node right here at Belmont, Harold, Siegel Avenue. In terms of the Belmont revitalization plan, calls for retail development for both of these sites. And again, you can see how the sites are located within this neighborhood node. The request that's before you tonight is pretty simple. We've got 2 commercial buildings and 2 single-family residential structures. Single-family residential structure on this side of the street with a commercial, it used to be a garage. The proposal is to tear down the single-family residential, to redevelop the garage, do a possible addition, and then reuse this with non-residential uses such as eating, drinking, entertainment establishments, and there's some other food and beverage services, gyms, offices, retail. On this side of the street, the proposal is very similar. There's an existing residential structure to be removed in this corner, and then the existing commercial building will remain. Again, they're proposing to have to do buffers along all of the sides. There's future amenity area for the property on this side of Harold and Belmont. If alcohol is sold as a part of the redevelopment and the new uses for this property, it must be offered with food for sale as well. Like I mentioned, they are retaining the existing residential buildings. They've specified building facade materials, and they've asked for a couple of optional requests. I mentioned to you tonight at the dinner meeting that this petition, when looking at it, reviewing for tonight, we realized that there were some items that still needed to be addressed, and we actually talked to the petitioner about those. And they do relate to the optional request. We're not sure that those optionals are both needed, and we will resolve that by the time it comes back to the City Council for decision. This petition is consistent with the Belmont Area Revitalization Plan. They're located in the neighborhood node within the Belmont neighborhood that will provide services to the existing neighborhood. Allows reuse of those existing buildings instead of them being demolished. They're going to provide fenestration improvements, and the site layouts are designed to match with the historic neighborhood character with no parking located between the buildings and the street. So staff is recommending approval of this of the rezoning of these 2 properties upon the resolution of the outstanding issues.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keplinger. Let's see, do we have any speakers for? Yes. For item 33, We have 4 speakers. You have 3 minutes. Karen Sullivan, John Lambert, Paul Fritz, and Todd DeLong. I think we know Mr. DeLong. Yes. Oh, there he is. I was wondering where you were. So because the staff is supportive of this and there's no opposition, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Before we hear from the petitioner, I wanted to say to the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and the city council members that my name is Paul Fretz, and I'm the co-chair of the Belmont Community Association's Land Use Committee. Along with me this evening is Karen Sullivan, one of our newest committee members. And we would like to take a moment to thank Todd DeLong and the city for working with our community to help preserve some of our existing historic buildings and commercial uses that bring a vibrancy to our neighborhood and our neighborhood's main street, Belmont Avenue.
Good evening, Mayor Lyles and Mayor Pro Tem and council members. As Mr. Fretz said, we, the Community Association and the Land Use Committee, we support this petition and hope that the council will support it as well. We appreciate all the work that the city staff and the council has done to get us to this point where we can seek rezoning. The city, of course, bought the properties in 2014 and put out a request for proposals to redevelop this. We support the project because we feel that revitalizing these buildings will preserve the neighborhood identity as a former mill village and preserve the neighborhood character. These older buildings, we feel like they help make the neighborhood recognizable and appealing. So we're happy to see the city involved in preserving these. So we hope you can support the project, and thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
You're right. Preserving buildings does make a difference in a community's character and how people feel about it. So thanks for what you do in your neighborhood. It's really appreciated. Todd, I think we had a minute left or so.
I'll be quick. Good evening. My name is Todd DeLong. I have the pleasure of serving in the Economic Development Department. With me today is Mr. John Lambert, who is the buyer and has the properties under contract. I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you may have, and I believe Mr. Lambert is here to answer any of your questions as well.
All right. Mr. Eggleston.
So I just want to echo a lot of what my friends in Belmont have said. This is arguably the center and the heart of the Belmont community. Everybody around here knows I love adaptive reuse. But this is also the location where last fall, I believe, we held the Better Blocks event in the Belmont community. And for anybody that's not been to a Better Blocks event, I'd encourage you to get to one if there's another that comes through our area. But it, I think, gave the neighbors and me a vision for what the Belmont community could be if we activate this intersection. This project will activate this intersection. We'll make this a much more walkable and interconnected neighborhood, and I am very much in support of it. Thank you all for being here in support of it, and thank you to the petitioner for the work they're doing to help re-energize this neighborhood. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Do we have a
Second.
All in favor of the motion to close?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is petition number 34, 2017-175, 332 West Bland Street for approximately 1.3 acres bounded by South Mint, West Bland, and South Church in District 3. Current zoning is I-2. Request is transit-oriented development mixed use. And Mr. Main is going to present that to us.
This is a site on Church Street at Bland Street, and you can see those streets. Here's Church Street and Bland Street. and it does not quite make Mint Street. There's a little intervening parcel in the way there. This is part of the South End area, and an area that's also referred to as the Gold District at times. The surrounding uses include a little hardware on this corner over here, the Soul Food Restaurant here, a number of townhouse development over here, and the Unknown Brewery, which is also on the same block with this. It's a series, or it's an industrial building, single story, and it is proposed for going to transit-oriented development. The existing zoning around it is largely TOD. There's also an I-1 transit supportive for the brewery right there, but most of this around here is TOD. There's a little bit of mud in there as well. So that is consistent with this, what this proposal is asking for. Again, it is an as-of-right TOD proposal. So any use in TOD would be permitted at this location. It could be existing buildings being reused. It could be redevelopment. All of that is open under the standards that we've laid out in TOD. So it is consistent with the South End Transit Station Area Plan, which does call for transit-oriented mixed-use development here. It's within a half mile of the Bland Street Station. It allows for the reuse of this site, which is an industrial site, for mixed-use development. The conventional uses in TOD would provide the appropriate kinds of development standards for this particular site. So we support approval of this petition.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers in favor. Bridget, Ms. Grant and Vishna Arora.
You will likely just have me tonight. Good evening, Mayor, members of Council, and members of the Zoning Committee. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Bridget Grant, and I'm a land use and development consultant with Moore & Van Allen. I think we've discussed at length the difference between conventional and conditional zoning. This is a conventional petition, but I am here to answer any questions that you have at this time.
All right, so are there any questions for the staff or the petitioner?
Move to close.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, I can tell we're getting close, right?
I mean, it's a TOD, not a whole
It's a
lot of-
TOD and it's conventional, right? So, thank you.
And it's in your district.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So, the next item is 35, petition 2017-178 by Atlantic Coast Contractors, approximately 4.3 acres, located at the end of Cressida, did I say that correctly, Mr. Bakari? Cressida Drive near the intersection of South Boulevard and East Westinghouse. The current zoning is light industrial, proposes general industrial conditional. The staff recommends approval of it, and Mr. Main, you'll tell us about it.
I will. South Boulevard is located on this left edge of the site plan that you see there, and East Westinghouse turns into Cressida Drive right at South Boulevard. This is the Toyota dealership, and this is the entrance onto Longleaf Drive, a neighborhood just to the south of there. The site is at the tail end, or at the of Cressida Drive, and it is for a little bit less than 4.5 acres. And it is developed right now with a contractor's yard. This particular, well, let's look at the existing zoning first of all. It's zoned I1, as is some of this other property around there. South Boulevard also has B2 zoning for some of the car dealers along there. The adopted future land use, again, the I-45 station is right across South Boulevard, right over there, the transit station. So this is within the transit-oriented or oriented development area. However, there is a piece of the ordinance which calls for existing uses that are there and are developed to continue to operate in industrial uses and other uses as long as the developers continue to have a need to do that. And that was a part of the transit station area plan, which was approved in 2009. The proposal right now is for I-1 uses. That's what it's zoned for now. And some limited uses in I-2, which is the general industrial classification, specifically contractors' offices and the storage yards, which is essentially what it's being used for now. It provides a separation between the neighborhoods, which are on both the south and the east side of this particular site. With, I think it's 87 feet in one point, 102 feet in another point, and provision for, I think it's 71 feet along the southern edge along this particular neighborhood down here. It also specifies that buildings would be constructed, would be limited to only 5,000 square feet in floor area. And it also commits to landscaping and a berm in at least one location along the perimeter of here, along the edges. The reason for this is that in 2009, the owner of this particular property came in and got some permits for some storage uses on the site that did not include a zoning inspection. It has been there and has been operating in the meantime, and he was under the impression that it was all legal, and it wasn't. So this would bring the existing uses into compliance. It would also provide for screening and appropriate buffers along the residential properties on either side of it. There was also a similar lot, the one located right to the north of it, that was in a similar situation, which was approved for a similar rezoning within the past year, I believe. Whoops, what did I do now? Pushed the wrong button. That is what the proposal is for. We do recommend approval of this petition upon resolution of a couple more technical resolution issues. It is inconsistent with the long-term plan for this area, which is for transit-oriented development, but it is consistent with a specific provision that we had in there that provided for Lance Cookies and a number of other uses along there that are industrial in nature, and the car dealers themselves, for them to be able to continue with their existing uses and to be able to continue to expand until such time as provision for redevelopment came to pass. So that's the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Main. We have one speaker for and one speaker against, so Mr. Fields, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, members of the zoning committee. I'm Walter Fields. Let me introduce Matt Butler, who is my client. He's the owner of Atlantic Coast Contractors and has been on this site, as Kent said, since 2009.
May I I'm sorry, I should have asked, is Robert Hess here? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I knew. So you have 10 minutes as well. Okay, Mr. Fields, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm not going to take nearly the 10 minutes that are allocated. This is a pretty straightforward rezoning. I actually am the person who helped Doggett Concrete, which is the adjoining neighbor to the north, when they found themselves in a similar situation just a few months ago. They had been operating there for years and years and years, thinking they were conforming, and in many cases had gotten permits of one sort or another. And then one day it was discovered that they weren't. Ironically, Mr. Butler's property was discovered while the evaluation of Mr. Doggett's rezoning was occurring. And so he then found himself in the same situation, and he asked me if I could help sort of rectify that. I would make an observation that with regard to this site, the change in the zoning from I-1 to I-2 and the conditional plan that accompanies it actually will probably physically reduce the amount of area that he has to operate on by virtue of the buffers that will have to be installed that had not previously been installed. The buffers vary in width because there are numerous utility easements running up and down the stream to the east of his property and again to the south. Those don't get counted in buffer widths, but they certainly are part of the total separation between uses. But the buffers that we have here range from 51 feet that would include a 6-foot berm to over 100 feet along the stream to the east. The staff has indicated they have 4 or 5 technical things they need us to correct on the site plan. I've looked at those. I don't see any issues with any of those. Kent's presentation, I think, thoroughly covered the history of the area, the zoning history, and the future of this area. I would take note of the fact that just like Doggett Concrete to the north, this site is not proposing to build large buildings, which would be a huge investment in the long run. A time may come where this site becomes available for development consistent with the transit plan, at which point it would then be rezoned to an appropriate transit supportive business. But right now, Mr. Butler and his business on this location, about 85% of his work is actually for the city of Charlotte, doing both programmed work and emergency work and repairing water lines and sewer lines and so on and so forth. And so, in summary then, we're asking to help us correct a situation which he found himself in, I think, totally as an innocent operator of a business, thinking he was in the right location and finding out only almost a decade later that he needed to change his zoning. So I'll stop at this point and answer any questions you may have.
Well, we'll first hear from our second speaker, Mr. Hess.
Oh, okay, great. Hello? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Sound like it sounds.
I don't.
My name is Robert Hess. I'm sorry I can't stand up.
No, sir.
I have
That's
a
okay. Good.
leg problem. So stating that, good evening. Thanks for letting me be here. My issue is I'm here to represent my family. I'm sorry about that. My family is located directly behind the Mid-Atlantic in a neighborhood on 8834 Sharon Brook Drive. We have lived there since 2006. The neighborhood has always been nice and quiet. There is a mix of $100,000 to $300,000 homes, you know, all along the street. And it is, directly across from the construction zone. There are trucks and heavy machinery running on a regular basis. In saying that, we have had an elderly female that is cared for with small children visit us and have had to stop due to the constant noise. But saying that, I have spoken with Walter and Matt, the owners. They said that they would take into consideration, you know, of the noise. They dump their vehicles, you know, the dump trucks. They go in reverse, you know, they have the beeping noises and stuff like that. When they dump their trucks, you know, it'll flap against the back and it vibrates my house. My pictures on my wall, you know, almost want to fall down. And with the smell of the diesel fuel and the dust, I spoke with them. They said it's just a storage, but I have videos stating that, you know, from 6:30 in the morning, I can hear them talking because it's so close to my neighborhood, probably 100 yards, I guess it would be. And I could hear them coming in and, you know, dumping dirt, running the front loaders, dump trucks, you know, pretty much everything. And they did find one noise that was from the Doggett. I guess they're a cement factory, and they did have, when it needs to be going continuously in the cement truck. They had some jackhammering in there, you know, to get it unstuck and stuff. But in saying that, I mean, it's just a point of all the noise, you know, and my house vibrating, my walls. I have videos that when the trucks slam their beds, you know, there's under my patio, the dirt's moving. You can see it, you know. It's just you can't sleep. You know, I mean, it's my house where I dwell, and, you know, I'm hoping to retire there one day. You know, I live there. But I'm just saying, I mean, with a 6-foot-high berm, you know, we're at like 0 level. You know, I could see them. They're probably a little bit higher than me, but I could see straight across. And it's like a hillside, but all the noise comes towards my house, you know. So that's pretty much all I have to say. But, you know, the vibration, you know, of my windows and my pictures, and a 6-foot-high berm, you know, that's not going to do anything. You know, it's just going to go straight over top of that. You know, they said about putting trees in there as well. I highly doubt it. You know, when your house shakes now with the dump trucks, you know, a tree and 100-foot gravel, 6-foot high is not going to stop the noise. And I just want to be at peace, you know, live a peaceful life, that's all.
Thank you very much.
I thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Mr. Fields has 2 minutes for a rebuttal.
Thank you, Mayor, and Mr. Hess and I have talked on more than one occasion. He came to our community meeting, and he and Mr. Butler and I talked on that occasion. I think they have talked to each other again since then. He and I have talked once again since then. If we could turn off the backup alarms, we could. We'd be happy to, but the federal government requires them to be there. One of the things that we have talked about, and it's sort of tied to this whole notion of this zoning and having to reconfigure the site to make sure we have the appropriate separations in that the city would expect to see, is it will require a change in the operational procedures on the property. Right now, the way the trucks come in and where they turn around and back up may actually end up having to be reversed because we'll have less of that portion of the site to work with. As a rule, and there are exceptions when you do emergency water line repairs for the city in the dead of winter, there are exceptions, but as a rule, they don't bring dirt to the site unless the places they normally haul it to are closed at the end of the working day. On those occasions, yes, they may bring dirt to the site and have to unload it, and then they'd reload it later. The normal business hours here are pretty much almost like a retail business. They operate basically from 7 to 5 or 6, Monday through Friday, but they do provide emergency services to the city for water and sewer line repairs and so forth. And what Mr. Hess points out is, if they have to be on a job site at 7 or 8 in the morning, yes, the crews do arrive early enough to get their equipment and get mounted up and go. I do think that there's a big difference that will occur by virtue of how this site is going to end up getting reoriented to make room for the buffers. And I think there are some benefits to the trees that will be installed on the community's edge between the operations on this property, Mr. Hess and his neighbors. I would take note that of all the neighbors that we notified, only Mr. Hess has expressed any concern.
Mr. Fields, thank you.
Thank you.
So are there, Mr. Eggleston?
Just real quick, I like the sound of planting trees there. I do wonder, he's talking about noise concerns that he has with the current use. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you could speak to how you anticipate the proposed zoning impacting the noise positively, negatively, or relatively neutral to the current issues, because his issues are current, not theoretical. So
right. The proposed use is essentially the current use. The difference is this use began in 2009 and has sort of grown on the site to occupy whatever space was available. And I guess that's good if you're in business, you want to keep growing. But in so doing, they have not put in the buffers and things that would have normally been required Had somebody gone out and inspected the property, or had there been an issue that came up along the way? As I said, I believe the inspectors noticed this site when they were evaluating the Doggett Concrete site just to the north, and they said, oh, what's that? And so that's what's brought him here today. One of the things that we have talked about, and we talked about this a little bit with Mr. Hess, is right now the vehicles sort of operate on the eastern edge of his site, and he's got storage and equipment stacked up against the back of the Toyota dealership. We may very well be in a position, once we get the buffer installed, to reverse that and put the storage equipment against the edge of the property, and then have the active part of the site more back up against the Toyota dealership. I mean, I think those are operational things that we can do that will change that, and we think there is a benefit in terms of the berming and the tree planting that will go along with part of this rezoning.
What you just mentioned would put the noise-generating activities further away from Mr. Hess's house.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Driggs?
Mr. Hess, are you saying that you're describing a difficult situation that you're in now? Are you saying that this rezoning would make it worse, or are you just taking this opportunity to kind of let us know the problems you're having?
It's not as simple as what they're saying, you know, we're level with each other by putting a 6-foot berm there. You know, the noise is just still going to be coming continuously towards me because there's a hillside on their side as well, you know, and trees, when it feels like an atomic bomb going off when they do their dump trucks.
Sir, I understand that, but I'm just saying, do you think that what they're proposing now will make it worse? Because, you know, the fact that the situation
be the same.
is bad.
It's just going to look pretty, but sound the same.
Okay, so colleagues, I would just suggest that if the disturbance was caused by the nonconformity that is being rectified here, then we might want to think about whether to legitimize that. But if the disturbance is not caused by the nonconformity, then I think that to simply paper what has already been going on is a small step, and then there's a question of whether noise ordinance or other kind of regulations, code violations may be occurring that's causing your life to be so difficult. So that's just my take on it, but thank you for your answer, sir.
Ms. Edgemere?
So Mr. Driggs clarified what I wanted to ask, whether this was something that was going to be improved as a result of the proposed rezoning petition. And I think that answers my question. Thank you.
I have a question. With the nonconformity of a site, what are the options for a citizen who is impacted by that nonconformity to rectify it?
Well, if it's a nonconformity, then it's something that should cease and desist. So the use is not allowed at that location.
So I think that's the difficulty, is nonconforming because of the inappropriate actions that were taken, not necessarily by us. And I don't know, it's been operating for 9 years. And so I think the question was, for me, whether or not there was any notice of nonconformity until a few weeks ago. Is that, I'm hearing that the inspections only occurred in the several weeks ago. And I'm not sure, Mr. Hess, the question I have have you filed complaints or had any opportunity to discuss these issues that you have for the noise with any one of the, if anyone in government or along the way with this?
No, I haven't. No, I
You
haven't.
have not. So in essence, you've been living with this for this amount of time. It wasn't until the notice
Correct, yeah.
that you knew that there was an opportunity to comment on it?
Correct.
So I understand Mr. Driggs' point. I also would say that it seems to me that if someone has a situation that is, if described accurately, that there ought to be at least an opportunity to work with the adjoining property owner to see if, even before the rezoning, for the buffering and all of that to determine whether or not there's something that's more effective versus just accepting that we can rezone it and have a 6-foot buffer, when if this were a conditional rezoning, or is, that if an 8-foot buffer works, or the size of the trees, or how the layout, it would seem to me that it's appropriate to have that conversation. So, Mr. Bakari.
We mentioned a couple times the relevance between the Doggett site, which obviously not only maybe triggered this, but also was rezoned as well as the gentleman who came to speak actually cited noise from the Doggett site with the jackhammers and the sand concrete stuff. So I guess my question is, that was approved almost in the same circumstances as this. Are there any differences between that scenario that was approved and this one that we see today?
They are very, very much parallel in terms of what they were doing on the sites, what they were proposing, or what they are proposing to do compared to what was done, and that was our 2017-062. So it is relatively recent.
So, maybe I misunderstood. Where is the Doggett site comparatively?
The map that you see here is our
Directly north?
Our existing site that we're discussing,
That site.
and it's this site right here.
Yeah, right above.
It adjoins this site.
Right, okay.
I know it adjoins. I'm just trying to determine the proximity of, when I look at the parcels there, the parcel map, I don't know where the houses are located, but it seems to me that there are more houses located with this one, or more parcels developed than with the other one as well. It looks to me like maybe 3 to 4 versus a grouping at the bottom. And maybe that I'm just looking at.
Actually, I think they're
map.
the same or slightly fewer that actually adjoin this site versus the Doggett site.
There may be, well, here's Sharon Brook Drive right here. This site is here, and there are a few houses that come down here and are stub off of there. And there's also Longleaf Drive down below in this other neighborhood as well.
Right. I just think there's more proximity to parcels. I don't know what's on them, I think. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Move to close.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you. The next agenda item is 2017-181 by Dakota Legacy Group for 3.5 acres on the east side of IKEA Boulevard, south of University Point, District 4, and current zoning, commercial center, proposed zoning, commercial center with a site plan amendment. And we have one person speaking for, and Ms. Keplinger is going to give us the staff presentation.
Yes, ma'am. This property is located at IKEA Boulevard and University Point Drive. This is IKEA. This is Interstate 85. This is the Walmart, and this is our site. In terms of the existing zoning, most of this property is, around this property is zoned for commercial development. In terms of the University City Area Plan, you can see this is proposed to be a mix of residential, office, and retail. The request is a CC site plan amendment. When the property was originally rezoned for the Bellgate development, there were 2 hotels that were permitted on this side of IKEA and University Point Boulevard with up to 500 rooms. The petition that's before you tonight is to consider adding a 3rd hotel in this location. It will be up to 250 rooms. They are prohibiting the extended stay type hotels. They do have a conversion factor in there that if the hotel rooms, if they can't make the hotel work, that they can convert to office. It is pedestrian scaled. It does have pedestrian scaled decorative lighting fixtures along the front, along IKEA Boulevard, which is consistent with the rest of IKEA Boulevard. They're proposing at least one operable door fronting IKEA Boulevard. The building will be architecturally compatible with the other buildings in the Bellgate development. The building will be sited with emphasis on maintaining pedestrian interconnectivity, and they also provided building elevations. So when you look at the site, you can see that the building is pulled up to IKEA Boulevard with no parking in front of it. This shows the close relationship to the retail that is located just across the street, but to have a pedestrian-oriented area right in this part of the Bellgate facility. So this is the elevations that they have shown that are part of the development. The petition is consistent with the University City Area Plan, which recommends office, civic, institutional, retail, hotel, motel uses, and residential dwellings. The proposed hotel complements the existing office and retail development and is an appropriate element in the mix of uses for the Bellgate development. The proposed building will have similar exterior materials. The new hotel will maintain the pedestrian interconnectivity with other buildings, and the architectural standards containing building materials, windows, street-facing doors, and limitation on blank walls are provided. So staff is recommending approval upon the resolution of the outstanding issues.
Mr. Brown, you have 3 minutes.
Tammy's done a great job. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Phipps?
Yes. I'm just curious as to know, do we know what the brand name is going to be yet for this?
I do not know what the brand. I can try and find out and let you know.
Thank you.
I have,
More questions?
okay, I have a question. I thought I heard you say that there were other, I saw the rezonings. Are there other hotels already approved, and where are they?
Yes, ma'am. They are, go back to my, give us 1 minute, we'll get back to our slides.
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, I could say.
Phipps could probably tell me right away,
They have
right?
right across the street, I think it's a Holiday Inn Express there.
So the original zoning allowed up to 500 hotel units in all of Bellgate. The hotels that were built are pretty small hotels with about 100 rooms on that site. This will allow a third site, but there will be no increase in the total number of hotel rooms originally allowed at Bellgate. That's the 500.
I got that. Okay, so,
So could you see the map on your screen?
yes.
Okay, this is where the 2 of the original motels were proposed, up to 500 rooms. And this is where they're proposing the third.
Okay,
Bridge too.
all right. Thank you.
Down the street from the entertainment district.
There's a Top
Stay there when you
Any
got
other-
Top Golf.
Any other questions concerning this?
Second.
Move to close. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next item that we have is 37, 2017-189 by S.L. Horton. Approximately 42.6 acres located at the end of Horton Road, east of Garrison, west of I-485. It's outside of the city limits. The current zoning is single-family residential airport noise overlay, Lake Wylie protected area. And the request is for general industrial conditional airport noise overlay, Lake Wylie protected area. We've got the staff to give us a presentation, and we've got 3 people speaking in favor. And so, Ms. Keplinger?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not going to try to repeat what all you said, so I'll just say that this is our site. It's located on the west side of I-485, just south of Garrison, which runs into West Boulevard. You can see from the existing zoning map, there's a lot of R3 in this area and some industrial, and then MX1 immediately to the south. And there's mud. This is part of the River District development. In terms of the Dixie-Berry Hill strategic plan, this property is recommended for office, retail, and light industrial uses. In terms of this site in relation to the proposed street network that was approved as part of the River District, you can see faintly on this map that this is the site that is proposed. And this is the street connection that is proposed through this site. As a part of this petition, the petitioner is proposing to reserve 75 feet of right-of-way preserving that right-of-way for that street connection, and then providing a 50-foot buffer on the side of that. And then you can see the proposed development area with a 100-foot buffer reduced to 75 feet with a berm along the southern property line. So what they're asking for is to allow up to 450,000 square feet of industrial uses in 3 buildings. There's a possibility that they may only have 1 building, and if they do have 1 building, then they will still comply with the subdivision ordinance in terms of connectivity. They're asking for warehouse distribution, office, manufacturing, and industrial uses. They do have a list of prohibited uses that they want to make very clear that they are prohibited. I will not read all those. Those are in your agenda. They commit to specified building materials, and they commit to improve Horton Road, their provision of turn lanes, sidewalks, and planting strips. And that's contingent on the right-of-way being available. So the petition is consistent with the Dixie-Berry Hill Strategic Plan, which recommends office, retail, light industrial. The site is adjacent to the River District. It is West Boulevard, which is located just north of the site, is planned to be extended to Dixie River Road as a part of the River District development, and this petition reserves the right-of-way for the future Western Parkway, referred to as Catawba Crossing in petition 2016-56 for the River District. The property is located in the Charlotte Douglas International Airport, south of the International Airport, and within the what we call the noise overlay contours. And what those contours measure is sound, and anything over 65 decibels is not conducive to residential development, so this area does qualify for that. So staff is recommending approval of this petition upon the resolution of the outstanding issues.
Okay, we have 3 speakers, Dan Lacey, Jeff Osborne, and Bridget Grant. You have 3 minutes, Ms. Grant.
Good evening again. I'm going to take Colin Brown's lead and say that we're going to not try to duplicate anything that Tammy has already presented tonight in this presentation. We do just want to hit on a few of the highlights specific to the Horton Road rezoning. As she mentioned, the proposed use is 450,000 square feet of light industrial uses, and we have preserved that 75-foot corridor for the Catawba Crossing. In addition to the improvements for Horton Road, we've worked in coordination with the developers from the River District team, and for example, this includes providing enhanced erosion control measures consistent with what they're doing. I've provided in the packet we handed out earlier those enhanced erosion control measures that we intend to include in our next submittal after the public hearing. The last thing I wanted to share, these are just some other Silverman projects in the areas. These images are not included in the rezoning, but we did want to share the quality of the product that they have done in the Carolinas. And we're here to answer any questions if you have them.
Are there questions? Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor. Tammy, actually, can we go back to your slide? Because you triggered a question for me. And I might be coming back, Bridget, but if you can go back to yours, when we talk about the realignment for West Boulevard, do we have a timeline on that yet?
I'm going to look to CDOT to see if they have an answer.
So while they're working on coming with that, I also have an additional question. Since we're doing a West Boulevard realignment, but this area is currently in unincorporated Charlotte. This is actually within the county limits, but since it's the closest area, the rezoning process is what it is. When we do the realignment, is that bringing the new West Boulevard area into the city limits, or is it still staying in unincorporated Charlotte? So I guess both of those are yours.
Yeah, so the West Boulevard realignment is still in planning. So I think that they're looking at alternatives and haven't determined a final alignment at all. That's my understanding of where we're at.
Okay. So Tammy, if we can get back to the PowerPoint presentation, because you noted in there the West Boulevard realignment, and I think we have a challenge when the fact that we're even utilizing this realignment, when we don't have a timeline on it, we don't have specifics on it, because what we have to consider is Garrison Road is still, one side of Garrison is residential. And just as we heard a resident speak about the impact of trucks going, I've already had a conversation earlier with the petitioner regarding the potential impact. And so the question I would ask Bridget is, do you know if there's room for language to be put in place regarding business work hours, since for the development, if this were to move forward, for when trucks will be coming in doing construction, because we don't know when the West Boulevard realignment is going to happen.
We can discuss that with the Silverman Group and determine if that's feasible. Absolutely, thank you.
Because that's something, hopefully, Ms. Keplinger, you and our CDOT team can work closely on, because we need to think about the potential impact of those trucks, because Garrison Road is still an undeveloped road. And even if you pull up on Virtual Charlotte and zoom in, you can see where, when trucks are already turning, they created a pathway in the grass that's right there from cutting, trying to make this curve. Now, luckily, because of 485, it should be an easier connector, but with this one-way road, I want to make sure that we're not creating a negative impact, especially without knowing when this West Boulevard realignment is going to happen. And I would hope that moving forward with development in this area, we not rely so heavily on the fact that because we keep talking about this West Boulevard realignment, but until we have some specifics on it, I would encourage that not be a factor. Because if you look at this, we're utilizing it as if it's a factor when it isn't. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay,
And if
thank
there aren't
you.
any other questions, move close.
Well, now we do have another question. Mr. Eggleston.
I think this is for staff. I know that with the River District project, there are a lot of controls and policies in place specifically geared towards water quality. I see outstanding issues number 2 and 3 probably address that to some degree. Would you say that would bring, if addressed, outstanding issues 2 and 3 would bring this project up to that same level of controls for water quality? Because if it's adjacent, whatever the adjacent properties are around the River District, if they're not seeking to meet those same standards, then what's being asked of or done by the River District will only be as good as the weakest link around it.
I will be very honest, I do not know, I do not have personal knowledge of the details of the River District, but that is something that we can respond to in our follow-up report.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Move to close.
Second. Motion, move to close, all in favor, I'm sorry, is there,
Again.
move to close, okay.
Thank
All
you.
in favor? Okay.
Aye.
All right, do I have a
Aye.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Dr. Hollow. Dan.